I started looking for data points around when people feel frustrated, constrained, that they can't explore, when they feel stuck. And I started finding more and more examples of this and case studies and data that supported that idea that it's not enough to allow your team to have psychological safety or the freedom to experiment and fail. They have to know where the boundaries are. But there is this misconception that people have that when they're given unlimited freedom or unlimited resources, that's when they're going to be the most creative.
Hey, Nicole, what do you get when a former corporate CEO and a do-gooding executive walk into a recording studio?
Well, Erin, nothing, because the two of us are usually on my couch or Zoom, because wine.
You get a podcast created for Gen X women who are bought into the corporate world, but fed up with the BS.
I know, it's how to thrive the 9 to 5 or 6 or 7.
It's career therapy, it's comedy, it's definitely full-on authenticity. Basically, we give you tangible strategies to rise in your career without compromising everything else.
Because work doesn't have to suck.
I am super excited, and you've done so many things, but specifically you have this new crusade, this new book, this new philosophy, and I love it mostly because it's such a juxtaposition and it's not a normal way of thinking, which is sort of my love language, which is this concept that innovation oftentimes needs boundaries and actually thrives in boundaries. So can you start out by, when did this seed plant for you? Was it I'm guessing it wasn't just an academic. Was there something that happened that sort of had this epiphany?
Yeah, it was the first time that someone shared with me this story about a landscape architect and the study she had done around playgrounds and children and boundaries. And someone just shared this simple story with me. So the story is that there was a landscape architect named Tatiana Goodman, and she was studying playgrounds because that was her area of interest. And she's curious about how some form of boundary might impact how kids play. So she had just a little experiment. She asked a group of preschool teachers to take their kids to a park in their town. And this park had the swings and the slide and playground equipment, and then a big grassy area, but a big open space. There was no hedge or fence or even some kind of boundary that told the kids how far they could go. Mm-hmm. When they arrived at the park, the teacher said just one thing: listen for the bell, and it's time to go. And all the kids stayed on the playground. Not one even ventured into the park. So the next week, she had the same teachers take the same kids to a different park in town. And it was very similar, swings and slides and big grassy area. But this one was enclosed with a fence. And when they got there, the kids were told the same thing, just one thing: to listen for the bell. And when they got there, the kids ran. They ran all the way to the fences, and they were really creative in their play. And she even observed that there were times they would start a game, stop it, and start something else. And what she observed and wrote up was that when we know how far we can go, then we feel safer to experiment, to explore, to be creative, and to play. And when we don't, we stay on our playground. When I heard that story, I started digging into my research. And I have conducted research with about 500,000 people and collected across every single industry. And I started looking for data points around when people feel frustrated, constrained, that they can't explore, when they feel stuck. And I started finding more and more examples of this and case studies and data that supported that idea that it's not enough to allow your team to have psychological safety or the freedom to experiment and fail, that they have to know where the boundaries are. But there is this misconception that people have that when they're given unlimited freedom or unlimited resources, that's when they're going to be the most creative. And there's a number of studies that back that up too.
So interesting. So how does that play out? Give us a practical example. I'm sure you then dug into companies and whether it was small or large, where this what's a use case that sort of plays this out in the working world?
Yeah, there's so many, but one of my favorites is actually from something that many of your listeners and many people may relate to, because when I've shared it, I've heard that people are part of this program. So Bank of America, big company, lots of resources, but they wanted to help some of their customers save money that weren't saving money. And so they created very strict boundaries around this new idea. First, they said, whatever we come up with has to use the existing technology, meaning the debit card, right? They're not going to give any new technology, new platform, new app. The second was, we're not going to change people's behavior or their spending habits. So we're going to have them help them save money, but whatever we do, we can't expect them to all of a sudden change. And the third is, they said, the third boundary was, it has to be seamless, invisible, kind of frictionless, really easy. And so their team went to work with those boundaries. They conducted some research and they found that when people made a purchase on their debit card, even for like a soda, for like $4.50, they actually rounded up to the nearest dollar in their mind how much they spent. So they created the Keep the Change program from those boundaries, which every time somebody spent money on their debit card, Bank of America transfers the money from their checking to their saving.
Yep.
And my colleague, Nick, said he has saved more than $5,000 just from, right? So, but it succeeded not because they had unlimited opportunities, create a new app, you have unlimited resources, but very strict boundaries within which they can be creative and play and come up with a new idea.
I love that so much. First of all, I have like 8,000 Bank of America accounts because I have like everything with them. So yes, aware of that. But I think back to my time in corporate, first of all, most leaders want to give direction like, oh, it should look like this, it should, versus the boundaries. So I think just that simple mindset shift that you're giving direction just like before, but your direction is like a 90-degree turn. It's like you're going to talk about the constraint. And one of my like recurring quote unquote bad dreams from corporate was every time you wanted to differentiate or you felt like you had to spend $1 billion on an IT project and it had to last 2 years, and then you wake up every day like anxious because it was always overrun, et cetera. So I love this simplicity of it. What sort of like practical things can people do as leaders to, start doing this? Maybe it's obvious, but let's talk about like what our listeners can start doing, whether they're in a leadership role or not.
So there are a couple different things. I say separate the what from the how, right? So you just gave an example, and a lot of times things can be very, defined. And I'm not saying that you're limiting creative growth. I'm saying separate the what from the how. So say this is what, we want to accomplish. These are the outcomes. And then really narrow the scope around how we're going to break through, but then leave the plan scripted, right? Back to my playground idea. So allow that creativity and that failure. So years ago, I helped start, I was on the managing team of a startup. And this is 25 years ago when nobody was doing financial transactions online. They were in chat rooms and sending emails or checking sports scores. And we came out with this new concept that was going to help people save money and do things more efficiently. And it was a business idea. And the challenge is that, we had this audience that weren't there yet. How do we break into this area, into this field? So we sharpened our pencil. Rather than going really wide, we went really narrow. And when we broke through and we were able to become the largest online company in this space, which was the largest online payroll company. So I helped found Sure Payroll. They then got to this problem where how do we stay innovative? So then the question, whether you're a startup or well-established, your association or a small business, how do you stay creative and innovative when you are successful? And so they created the Best New Mistake Award. And
I love that.
with the Best New Mistake, they had very strict boundaries around it. They said, this is the area around where we can explore and experiment, but we want to encourage people to take risks, calculated risks, risks that within the boundaries of what we have. And if it fails and you write it up and you submit it because you learned something, you win one of our awards at the end of the year. And then they put the money behind it. So what Your Payroll did was they gave out many awards at the end of the year, but the award with 4 times the amount of dollar amount award was for the Best New Mistake Award. Yeah. So it's just a way to encourage that within a culture of that risk taking. So one of the things I suggest is people talk about risk tolerance, and that is your psychological, how you feel about taking risks. they focus on the wrong thing. So the right thing to focus on
Mm.
is your risk capacity. What capacity do you have for failing, for experimenting, and for it not working, and then going back and learning from it? It may just be 5% of your customer base. It may be within the first 5 minutes of onboarding a new client or customer. Look at your risk capacity and then experiment in that space.
Love that. What about you? What was your biggest, best mistake in your career? I'm curious.
Well, there have been many that I've made. But most recently, I went up to the Arctic. And I'm a wildlife photographer. So when I'm not on stage giving keynotes and I'm not writing books or running my company, I grab my camera gear and I travel around the world. And I went up to the Arctic with this dream of capturing a photo of a polar bear. And I was also going with one of the very best photographers in the world. And I wanted her to like me and say, "You're one of us," and to say, "You can be here." And we are the northernmost boat in the world. So we are way up in the pack ice. It's just this year. And I'm up there and I think I'm all set, except for that I had brought these gloves, these battery heated gloves, because I live in Colorado and I ski on cold days and I figure I'm good. Well, Daisy, the leader of this group, looks at me and she says, "Didn't you get my gear list? Like you can't use those gloves. They're like Muppet hands, right? I can't use them to take photos, but it's minus 40 degrees.
You can't take them off.
So I took them off, but then my fingers stopped working and all my photos came out blurry. And here I am writing a book about boundaries, actually getting at night, and I'm not there. And I kept trying to push beyond the boundaries. I kept saying like, well, what if I use a different lens, or what if I use this other equipment? And day after day, I couldn't get a shot. And at the end of the trip, we had this one last chance. There was a mama walrus and the pup, and they were on this floating piece of ice. And all the photographers scrambled to take photos. We go to the lower deck and we use all of our different lenses. It's a little bit warmer. It's like minus 10, not minus 40. I can manage it without my Muppet gloves. And we go back inside and I still missed the shot. And one photographer got it. But what was amazing is she had all the same challenges we did, but another one because she had cut her leg on the first day and she couldn't stand and she couldn't be out there very long. Yet she did something different than the rest of us. Rather than saying, "How can I break through the boundaries?" or "How can I get this shot?" or try to push through, she said, "What can I do with what I have?" And that made her step back and look at the whole scenery and capture this stunning image that I'll never forget. And I'm like, here I am, thinking, being the expert about, define the edges and then play inside it. And I didn't take my own advice. And I just,
This is why I tell people we write books, and they think it's like the same with like my 50% rule. You could understand it in 2 hot seconds. You could understand that boundaries are important. But even us who preach it, practice it, write 60,000 words on it, you have to constantly be reminded. Hey guys, Erin here. Stop. Do not do it. Don't fast forward. I have something too important. I have a couple of very passive aggressive questions to ask you that you don't want to miss. Here they are. 1, do you find yourself often comparing yourself to others? Like, they work harder than me. They get noticed more than me. They have better luck than me. They're smarter than me. Or do you also just feel exhausted from having to always work as hard, if not harder, than everybody else to stand out and succeed? Like, I know you have these challenges. We all do. And this is why I wrote the 50% rule. And I know you need to read another book, like you need a hole in the head. But I'm telling you, this book and this rule, I'm obsessed with it. And it has changed my life. It has changed the lives of others around us. And it has also been the formula for success behind so many successful people. Savannah Bananas, Hamilton, Weird Al Yankovic. The 50% rule is the simplest shortcut to stop comparing, stop copying, stop chasing other people, and like literally compete in your league of your own. There isn't a day that doesn't go by where I stop myself and I'm like, oh, she did a talk that I wish I could do. She's got more. No, it doesn't matter. because we don't compete in the same league. I compete in a league of my own because I am constantly 50% ruling things. So if you're interested in this concept, which by the way is more fun as a team sport, but at least start with yourself. You cannot miss this book. It's not only powerful, it's really freaking fun to read. That is always my number one goal. It's my number one goal with my first book. It's my number one goal with the 50% rule. I want to make it enjoyable to read it. Why? So that you read it. So if you feel like you are stuck with these comparison cramps or just all the symptoms that I talk about in the book of sleep running syndrome, self-doubt gout, and pioneer paralysis, and well, you have to read the book to find out more, then just go buy the darn book. Easiest way, go to Amazon, search the 50% rule, and I cannot wait to hear how you 50% rule things.
We haven't really talked about this before, but I'm sure they're sort of congruent, but your other sort of mantra and brand and keynote is about taking more shots. Then how did these two sort of come together? Were you talking about taking more shots before, but you're like, oh crap, now you understand that you need to take the shots with boundaries? Or talk to us about, the take more shots mantra and work that you do. Absolutely. So I started with take more shots, and I thought that's how you achieve success. And I've done that in my life, like in capturing an amazing photo of a hummingbird, in working in all the research I've done. It's about all the tries, right? I call it the math of more tries, right? That makes sense. But that alone wasn't enough. And so I started to think through the framework of what do I need to do before I could take more shots? And I realized that a lot of people talk about psychological safety, like that free to experiment. And now I'm adding in the idea around have clarity around your boundaries. When you have clarity around how far you can go and you have that culture, that environment, you've internalized it and said, yeah, I'm okay if I fail and what can I learn? And I understand where to play. That's when you could take more shots. So I went first to take more shots and then realized I needed to have clarity around where's the space I'm playing. So back to the photography example, and I could tell you another example of this as well. Rather than looking at my camera bag and all my cameras and my lenses and all the things, what if I just had 4 lenses and one camera body? Would it be easier? Could I take more shots within that space because I'm not overwhelmed by all the noise and all the distractions out there? And that's what Remy did, the other woman on this trip. So most people don't know this, but if I were to ask you, Erin, what do you think is the most successful U.S. restaurant based on square footage and revenue? Anything come to mind for that?
Chipotle. I don't know.
Right. I mean, a lot of people might
Who
say
knows?
Starbucks or Chipotle. It's actually In-N-Out Burger.
Mm.
And In-N-Out Burger has 4 menu items: hamburgers, fries, shakes, and drinks, right? Now compare that to Cheesecake Factory. Almost successful, right? But they have like 20 pages in their menu and hundreds of items, and everybody orders the same thing when they go back there. So if we think about taking more shots, as we think about like, how can we be more successful within the space, that comes once you've defined those boundaries. And then it's the math of more tries. Then you need to start experimenting.
So that boundaries and the math, I love that. What comes to mind when you say, too many choices, is I just think about sales presentations, B2B, more is more, the PowerPoint decks that are 85 pages long of here's all the things they do, but 98% of them are the same exact things their competitors do. How do you see this boundary conversation playing out from a marketing, external, sales perspective?
Yeah, one of my favorite stories actually is around a company that we all know that had but lots and lots of different messages around their brand. And over time, they started losing market share. So it's not pure sales, but in a sense, they're trying to sell their product. And what happened is they had, in every market globally, they had all these different messages and they didn't narrow that focus on that. So their goal was, how can we have a universal truth? How can we have something that could be our boundary here, but then allow markets in other regions of the world to customize it in their way? Same with sales, right? How can we have something that will resonate with people? Like, what is that universal truth? but then allow people to tell the stories and share the data or do what you need to do in the sales. So that company is actually Snickers. It's Mars and Snickers.
Mhm.
And you may remember 15 years ago, the ad that they came out with and the universal truth, you're not you when you're hungry
Yes.
or satisfied.
Yes.
So Snickers
Brilliant.
they didn't sell the features. They didn't sell the chocolate and the gooey caramel and the nuts. They didn't sell the size. They didn't sell on price, right? They sold on the outcome of having the Snickers bar, right? And they created that campaign, which became not only one of the top 10 Super Bowl ads of all time, but increased global sales by 16%. So there's where the sales.
Yep.
But then regionally, all around the world, all the different agencies could do their own twists and be creative on the universal truth, but they sold the outcomes. They didn't sell the features, which is often what I see with those 80-page sales decks, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And to pick the one thing, and I immediately go to Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, who are totally opposite. If you see their commercials, all they do is show you it and know that if you see a big peanut butter cup, you're going to be craving it more than if you don't see it, right? Like
Right.
they sell the craving, the taste. Yeah. I think it's such a great lesson. A lot of people listening are in, B2B market. And I think those lessons, I think there's a pressure because you're sitting in front of what feel like smart people. Your sales aren't just through a commercial or whatever. You're in a boardroom. But the reality is, I think the buyers really crave those boundaries and that definition and that clarification of what is it that really is different about you. And so
Absolutely. And the outcomes. Right.
The outcomes.
We focus so much on,
The
I'll
widgets.
get straight to you, all the ways that we are different, right? And here's all the data and here's all the facts and here are the specs on the product that I'm selling or the software or whatever it is. And they get too far away from the stories and the outcomes that really resonate with people.
Yeah.
And you don't know how to marry the two, right? You think, okay, well, I've got to bring in both components into my sales presentation or into the work I'm doing or what I'm pitching at work, even if it's just pitching it to my boss. But you need to focus on, by defining the boundaries, this is what we stand for. This is what the high level outcome of it is, the thing that's going to resonate. And then I can bring it down.
I love that. I can't wait to even just test that with, people that are on my team. The next time we have like a project, instead of being, like, Rachel, here are all the bullets of, what I'm thinking. Instead say, here's the goal and here are the boundaries, and just experiment with it.
Absolutely. Like, I work in a space where a lot of people are trying to attract the next generation. They always say that. How do we get younger people to do X, Y, or Z, right?
Yeah.
And I've worked with the National Beer Wholesalers Association. I've worked with all different industries you can imagine. And they're all trying to get, or fill that pipeline of people that will be their longtime loyal customers. And how do they attract them? So then they go very thin and very wide, right? And rather than picking one channel, one method, one idea, and then building it out from there, they try everything, right? And so people take more shots. Oh, well, I got to try everything. But that's actually not going to work. It's going to work with you once you say, this is the space that makes sense for us. And then let's take more shots within it.
Hey there, it's Erin. I'm just popping in real quick to ask you a question. Is there any chance you know someone who is looking for a keynote speaker for their upcoming event? Look, I know that many event organizers, they struggle to find a speaker who provides both tangible value and business knowledge, but that also lights their audience on fire. And I truly believe there aren't many speakers like me out there who are both former corporate executives and professionally trained speakers. And there's definitely none that roll in with an orange suitcase they unpack with their audience. Trust me on that. I would love nothing more than to bring my message of using authenticity as your strategic career and business advantage to people spinning in your universe, especially if you'd be there. I promise my talks always create an immediate buzz, but not just right after, but for months and years after the event is over. You can learn more about my message, style, and reviews, and share my speaking info by going to beauthenticinc.com/keynote-speaking. That's B, just the letter B, authenticinc.com/keynote-speaking. Or of course, we have it right in the show notes to make it easy for you too. Would you mind sharing how boundaries sort of affected your life, I think very personally with your health and what that created? Because I just think, and I wouldn't ask if I didn't know you've shared that on a few stages before. I just think that story is something we all need to hear.
Oh, thanks, Erin. Absolutely. So, like we both said earlier, we know this, we write a book on it, we live it, but sometimes we need something to remind us how important this is in all aspects of our life, because we all know that things that happen in our personal life impacts what we do every day in our work life, right? So, 4 years ago, I went to the doctor and got a diagnosis that wasn't life threatening, but it was life changing. And what they did was they found a non-cancerous tumor on my pancreas. Now, you could hear the words, not life threatening, we're just going to monitor it. But I totally went home and freaked out. And I Googled it at the time. Now I'd probably chat GPT it, but that's what you do, right? You look this up. Oh my gosh, what does this mean?
It's a tumor.
Oh my gosh. So when I got that news, I started making some changes and doing things. And what happened is that I remembered a list I had created when I was 29, a list of goals, things I wanted to do. And I'd saved that list. I'd put it in a scrapbook and put it in a box, and it's with me to every house. So when I got the diagnosis, I went to my basement and I pulled out that box with that scrapbook and pulled out that list. And some of the things were no longer important to me, but there were a few things that were. Now, we all know that time isn't unlimited, but having that diagnosis created a boundary I didn't know I needed, right? It said, you know what, start doing the things that are important to you, which wasn't everything on the list, but were a few things. And one of them was to bake the perfect chocolate chip cookie because my dad loves them. It's the best gift I can ever give him.
Which
And
I
so-
have the recipe now. I can't wait to try it out.
Yes, and so it is the best. And so I set out with a certain amount of months and a number of recipes and a goal, and I achieved it. I now had the recipe for the very perfect chocolate chip cookie. The second thing on that list was to go back to my roots, which I used to be a photojournalist, and to buy a camera and to go out and photograph wildlife. It had always been my dream. Now, Erin, when I first started, I was terrible. I got more butt shots than geo shots. I have lots and lots of animal butt shots. But eventually, I learned everything within the space of photographing wildlife in Africa and Antarctica and around the world, around how the boundaries of the environment and the weather and the animals could actually help you become a better photographer. Well, now it is November of 2024. I go back to the doctor because every year I monitor this tumor, and they do the MRI and the tumor's gone. And I realize that I'm so lucky, not because it disappeared, but because it appeared in the first place and created this boundary I didn't know that I needed, which is, of course, life it doesn't go on forever. So just by having that time frame helped me start doing the things on the list. And the funny thing is, this isn't a bucket list suggestion. This isn't to get things done. This is what boundaries do you need to set so that you go and do the things that are really important to you by defining what's important to you, whether it's in personal life or at work.
Yeah, I think it's so important. It makes me also think about our friend Rebecca Heiss's work that she does around stress and anxiety. I don't know if you've seen her latest book and just this concept that you sometimes you need that stress. And I think that's a different kind of boundary that you're right. It's and I've definitely realized it's the classic, like, especially prepping for a speech, it's really hard for me to do. And I don't have that boundary, that constraint, a little bit of that good stress that comes.
100%.
Right? And
I love her work. Yes.
Yeah. How do you manufacture that? Just two questions, final questions. The first is we love to ask people about bucking the norm. This concept of is there a time that you bucked the norm and something good came about it from it?
Yeah. Well, I definitely say that most of my life I have bucked the norm. I am not afraid. I was born with a very high risk tolerance and capacity and understanding of my capacity. And so throughout my life, I have just made decisions that people will look back and say, wow, like you were so brave to do this. And I can't even imagine, to me, I can't even imagine not doing these things. So there are, whether it was, much more advanced in my career, very experienced, run a company, and then decided, you know what? I'm going to launch and do more keynote, right? Everything. Well, so many of my peers and colleagues are thinking about, okay, the next 10 years, how can I wind down? How can I retire? And I'm thinking a completely different approach to what do I want to do next. But as a photographer, I have done this many times where everybody says, this is the perfect, the ideal shot. And I've been out with a group of photographers, and I was in Antarctica, and we were in the Zodiac boats, and we're in the water, and there are more than a dozen humpback whales. And they're doing this thing where they're going in circles and they're creating this bubble net and bringing all the fish up to the surface. And as they're doing it, their mouths are coming up and eating the fish. Now, from up above, this is stunning. And one person has a drone, but that's not my view and it's not my reality. I'm in this boat and there are 5 people next to me, and right across from me are 6 more photographers also shooting it. And in between us is a whale. So whatever I'm catching, it's the exact same thing as everybody else.
Yeah.
So I turned around and I'm looking all around me, and I see one whale in the distance, and it's diving in and out of the water pretty far away. And one of the pros in the boat said, Sheri, what are you doing? The action's right in front of us. You're missing the moment. And I realized, what am I really missing? If everybody else is capturing it, there's nothing I'm going to do that's unique. And I don't actually like what I'm seeing. So I took the risk. I photographed that whale in the back, and we all get back. The whales swim away, and we all go back on the ship, and it's lunchtime, but nobody wants to eat. We clear off the table and we put our cameras down and plug them into our laptops. And everyone's looking through the photos, and you could tell people are disappointed. They just couldn't get the shot. And then I saw my shot. And that shot of the whale diving in and out of the water with the water dripping off the tail is one of the favorite ones I ever got. And that was me bucking what everybody else says. This is the moment. So when I think in the workforce, whether it is AI or social media or whatever the trend is, if everybody is doing it and there's no way that you can do it in a different way, look at the spaces that other people are ignoring. What can be hidden in those spaces that everybody else is not paying attention to, and that's how you can stand out.
Holy freaking Luya. One of my battle cries is stop outworking others, start out uniquing them. I love that so much. That's such a great metaphor analogy too of sitting in the boat with, because you're literally with other photographers. Like normally we have competition and we're in different states but like you're literally physically within inches of each other. And so to recognize what I love about that message is you didn't do it just to be different. You did it also because that was a shot that you actually loved, even though you were supposed to love the frantic multiple fish flying, but that wasn't where your heart was. And that's such a great metaphor, I think, for so many people and probably the challenges they're facing. Take the other shot.
Yeah, and I've done this throughout. Sometimes it's the worst conditions, right? I started a company in the worst conditions. I started my company, Avenue M Group, in 2009. Nobody was starting companies, right? So I've been in a boat, and the sun is way overhead, and all the photographers are done shooting for the day because it's terrible light. But I know that if nobody else is shooting, why not? Why not be the one? And so I got down into the bottom of the boat. We're on the Chobe River in Botswana, and a crocodile is floating by. And again, lighting conditions terrible, but I started thinking creatively. Can I overexpose it? Can I create more white space? And just in this moment, a dragonfly flew in and landed on the croc's head. And I'm the only one that got this moment. And it's because sometimes the best opportunities are in the worst conditions when everybody else is turned away.
Oh, mic drop. I love it. All right. Before I ask you the last pretty simple question, you have this new book coming out. I don't know when we're going to air this, to be honest. We didn't talk about it, but can you pre-order it yet? Or we're recording in end of September. Can you pre-order it now?
You can pre-order it now. So,
okay, so we're going to put that link in. Tell them a little bit more about that.
Sure. So I just wrote a book called The Unexpected Power of Boundaries, Rethinking the Risks, Rules, and Real Drivers of Innovation. And it is coming out in February of 2026. But you can pre-order it now. And I have a link on my website, which is sherijacobs.com. but it's filled with these stories, both from my life, from uh, thousands of surveys that I've conducted, research data, and also interviews that I've conducted. And I give really practical how-to ideas about how you can implement this in any kind of work setting.
I love it. I love a book full of stories where you can just sit and dream and wander and think about how that can inspire you. So I'm super excited for it. Definitely go grab that, guys. Sheri, it's, as you can tell, a major badass, and I know it's going to be amazing. Last question. What's just your last final tip to make work suck less?
You know what? I was thinking the other day about how things have changed, how life used to be simpler, not easier, but right. You left work at 5. Your boss left work at 5, and the phone, it was like tethered to the wall, right? There was no one last email, one last text, and we're not going back to that. And I would never advise somebody to lock their phone away, and that's the solution from from getting away from all that. But find ways to remove the noise. Big noise. If you feel stuck and you're looking at something, it's not about having more. It's actually about having less and having more clarity around what you want to do. So to make work suck less, it is when you're looking at whatever project or challenge or thing that you're kind of stuck on at work, where can you draw 3 boundaries or even just one around and say, I'm only going to focus on this, and move away the noise that is distracting you from getting unstuck, from finding a solution there.
I love it. I love it. I love the practicality. My head is already spinning on how I need to do it. I'm sure our listeners' heads are spinning on how they need to just, I think I love the take on boundaries so much. We talk about it in sort of the personal and the work-life balance, but I love that you've taken boundaries and really put it on steroids and made it powerful beyond its, sort of normal talk and normal use. So this was so great. Thank you for sharing all of this and previewing it with us. And I can't wait to read it and read all the stories. And I'm sure our listeners can't wait either.
Oh, thank you so much, Erin. This has been so much fun. So I really appreciate you, and I appreciate your listeners and this podcast.
Thanks.
Hey, it's Erin with a teeny request. If you have ever gotten any value from this podcast and you'd like us to stick around, plus you want it to continue to grow so we can kind of swindle bigger and more knowledgeable guests to join us and to keep providing you with tangible and inspiring actions you can take to achieve the career and life you deserve, could you please just take 1 minute to leave us a rating and a review? Those reviews go a long way in attracting guests to the show, and candidly, they really make Nicole and I's day. We see you. We really do. So when you have the time and inspiration, we'd love to see a rating and review from you. Thank you.